Okay.
Yep, we're going.
Okay, Jordan, I have a good question for you.
Yeah.
Something you talk a lot about, and I'm not quite sure what it is. So, spiritual emergence.
Mhm.
Explain that one to me.
Yeah, so spiritual emergence is a term that was coined by Stan Groff, Christina Groff, and they were psychiatrists and did a lot of work on people going through the awakening process. So you can think about spiritual emergence can border on an emergence where you have an experience, and then it can border on emergence. It can become an emergency, which is a spiritual emergency where your daily life becomes disturbed and disrupted, and it can be misconstrued at times by both psychologists and psychiatrists in the mental health establishment that are formally trained in the formally Western medical processes, that it's a form of psychosis or there's some mental illness going on. But basically what's really happening is there's this powerful transformative spiritual process occurring within the person. And it's not necessarily applicable to give them a normal diagnosis for medications or inpatient hospitalization necessarily. Under some circumstances it is. There's a lot of resources out there, Integrated Mental Health University within Bragdon and the Spiritual Emergency Network. These were areas that I was able to figure out what it was. I read the book Stormy Search for Self by Stan and Christina Groff. And I learned about how to diagnose the difference between a mental illness and a true spiritual process, right? Because in one of the major things that came to my knowledge was able to build a long-standing relationship with another person, to have a good relationship with another, a solid relationship with another person is a sign that you'll be able to treat it as a spiritual emergency without medications with a positive outcome, or at least you're more likely to do so. But for layman's terms, that's basically an awakening process that's coming across as a completely change in personality. There's a lot of things that can happen in that process. Basically, you're rediscovering your soul self. What you had thought of a reality before is changing. How you're interacting with the material world is changing. The energy inside your body is changing. Your identity is either changing or dissolving. And you're really coming into contact with another layer of yourself, which is your spiritual self. And that spiritual, yeah, go ahead.
Does this get started because you're on a spiritual search, or you're on a spiritual journey, and then all of a sudden this happens? Because this happens to some people, it doesn't happen to everyone. So I'm curious to how it begins.
There's many triggers. The number one trigger is stress, having stressful things in your life, grief. And we can see that there's a lot of people going through stressful events, and that the rates of spiritual emergence are increasing. But there's a lot of dynamics to this, because we're also increasing in frequency, as we talk about, as the frequency of the earth is increasing. We're entering a part of the universe that's higher frequency, and we're changing different yugas, and we're going from one time cycle to the next. And that's basically suggesting that consciousness is going to change with the energy of the universe, and with higher frequency becomes changes in consciousness, and your frequency of your body increases, and then you're going to have more of a likelihood of having these aha moments physically. So if we look at it from as spirituality, you have basically at the lower end of this of numbers for the number of bodies. You have your four, your mental, emotional, spiritual bodies, physical body as well. They're all integrated and have to work together, but this is almost like rediscovering that part of you that is, you've gone throughout your life, you've built an ego, you've become successful, you've had an idea of how things work, how to relate to reality, what you want, this or that. Well, the soul, it's almost as if the soul decides to jump in the driver's seat. And there are many times it can run in families. It can be caused by, as I said, stress and a multitude of other factors. There's many factors that can come into this, but it's at an individual level too. And it's at a developmental level for your soul. So if you think about this being Earth school, that's up to you. It's up to your higher self. It's up to your individual makeup as to when this will occur and when it's beneficial for you. And that would be at a soul level. You'd have to decide that. And sometimes this isn't what we would consider an experience, like doing ayahuasca or an hallucinogenic and having a spiritual experience. That's an awakening experience. It's like, but that's not an emergence or a process, an emergency or an emergence. This is a full-on transformative process that involves psyche, all the different yogic bodies, and needs to be able to be recognized by mental health professionals. Mine, they did not do that. My coworkers thought I was going insane, and I don't blame them. They were acting out of love, but they did, they wanted me to go into a psychiatric unit, and I almost did. And I was about to check myself in, but I had a clarity moment. And the clarity was, I'm doing this for them. I'm not doing it for myself, because I know I'm not supposed to be here. But I was going to do it so that they didn't lose sleep, so they felt safe. They felt that I was going to be safe. And you really just need to know that you're not going crazy, that this is a whole other world, that the whole metaphysical spiritual world is a real thing. It's part of our lives. It's part of this. And if you haven't been in touch with it your whole life, it can be kind of a tumultuous situation. It can be for mine, it was volatile. It moved really quick. And sometimes these processes match the personality of the individual. So if you were full bore, 0 to 100, did everything, pull it off like a Band-Aid, like I was, my awakening matched my personality at the time. And it was very quick, volatile.
How long is quick to you?
It's a good question, because it starts off and it's the amount of change, I would say, frequency change. So what had to drop away. And when I say quick, I guess I would put that in a better term to say that a lot dropped off of me and away from me in a very short period of time. There's a lot more to get rid of. And that was a lot in the form of ego, what I thought made me happy, dysfunctional relationship patterns, trauma. And I had to prioritize my personal work, and it's a still ongoing process. By no means am I done. And so quick would be, there's a lot of garbage that I had to sift through in a very short period of time that fell off. And to be honest with you, it was like my soul had an itch that needed to be scratched. And that's the best way I could describe the process. And it was very liberating, scary, uncertain, but very important to have support at that time. And I was gifted with a mother who had spiritual background as well as a mental health background, and provided me with the appropriate environment to work through this. And I was able to come out okay. I had the support from my family. Not everyone has that. A lot of people do get medicated, which stymies the process. And so that's why I decided to make this a service as well, because I experienced it, and I think everyone should have a opportunity to have some sort of understanding and support during this, because it's going to happen more and more as we increase in frequency and prepare for spiritual and consciousness evolution at a global scale. It's already begun.
I'm curious. So the pre-you, spiritual emergence, and the post-you, what did those both look like?
You could ask my mother. She says nothing short of miraculous, but pre-me was type A, workaholic, alcoholic, but not based on dependence on the actual. It was mental dependence, not physical dependence on alcohol. I had depression and anxiety. I was an empath my whole life and didn't know it, and was absorbing other people's energies. And that gave me a lot of depression. And so really being able to understand and control your energy field and protect your energy field, I wasn't doing that. It was wide open. You open up your energy field with drinking. I was an addiction researcher, and, would smoke cigarettes. And I wasn't the only one. The addiction researchers love to have fun.
The patient and the researcher.
I had a lot of trauma. I had codependent relationship problems growing up. My relationships were typically codependent. I always wanted to be a savior, or there's something here or there. And so I was really in that rut, that karmic rut, and you don't understand how your actions and your behavior really affect your external world reflecting back to you that we're actually co-manifestors, and what we are thinking and what we are representing are reflected back to us. None of this was in my life. All I was is goal-oriented. My positive and reinforcement and self-worth came from my external world, from success. And part of that was how I was raised. All that was gone. You know, I was like, okay, what now what? And so now it becomes about becoming whole, connection to the all, to facilitate spiritual evolution for your soul growth as an experience here in an earth school, where the core isn't about external and horizontal relationships. What can I grasp and bring to me? It's about a vertical relationship with source energy, a vertical relationship with yourself, where you're able to really keep a very well-defined center that isn't necessarily dependent on what happens externally. But granted, that's also a work in progress. But it became, I summarize it this way. Before my awakening, I was working in a research laboratory. I was going to have my own research laboratory, right? Mm-hmm. After the spiritual emergence, which was an emergency for a while, after that, I became my laboratory.
Oh.
So that's how I describe, yeah. So that's how I describe that. And so it can be, if you look at it that way, it can be less daunting. But so that's where the yogic sciences then comes in, and Reiki and some of the other woo-woo stuff some scientists look at, where you're really tapping into the spiritual source in a different vein or a different perspective, and kind of gaining some steam there and bringing that in. Yeah.
Okay, for somebody who is going through this or think they may be going through this, what is your suggestion to them?
My suggestion is to use your intuition, contact someone who's gone through it, or a professional who can support you through it.
Is that a coach? Is that something that you do?
It's something. I'm going to take the lab practical this summer, so I will be certified in being able to provide that in just a few months, and that will be through the Integrative Mental Health University program, which also supplies spiritual coaching. So through Life Purpose with that curriculum, and then life coaching. So you'd have life coaching, spiritual coaching, but then the spiritual emergence aspect at the end there as well. And obviously, if it's there's Spiritual Emergence Network is a place where you can go, and Integrated Mental Health University is a place you can go where you can find certified spiritual emergence coaches and counselors on a list that specialize in this process. You can I also recommend educating yourself on the process, maybe reading A Stormy Search for Self by Stan Groff and Christina Groff, or going to the Integrated Mental Health University website for some self-education, as well as the Spiritual Emergence Network in the United States. And if you start there, it's a really good start. And so I had contacted a clinic that was involved in that earlier on when I didn't know what was happening. And they reassured me. I even had a taxi driver driving me away from the psychiatric unit. He said, "You're not going crazy. You just lifted the veil, my dear son." I go, "Who is this taxi driver? Who is this, an angel?" He seemed like an angel driving me back to my apartment,
Oh, that's wonderful.
So call in your help, and know that the universe will provide for you, but really have the reflection back to you that you need if this is something you think that's going on, and have a professional look at, and so preferably a coach that has gone through the process and understands it, so can just hold space. A lot of times it's not about saying things or trying to put a label to things. When you're going through this, you don't want labels, you don't want psychoanalysis. You just want space, you want a safe space, a safe container, and someone who's non-judgmental, who can support you in a way that can only be done through experiential perspective. And so that would be how I'd recommend it. Yeah. And so that's what I would like to provide as well. So that's why I'm here.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
Sure.